there, and welcome to Conversations Worth Your While, the podcast where we dived into real, meaningful conversations with heart-led experts who bring wisdom and insight and a whole lot of humanity to the table. Together, we explore ideas that spark growth, that shift perspectives, and help you live and lead more fully, both personally and professionally. Today, we're exploring the topic, too weird, too sensitive, too everything, or just right. And this conversation is worth your while because so many people are walking around burned out, anxious, and overwhelmed, carrying invisible weights of blame and shame and judgment that never should have been theirs to carry. So if you've ever wondered, why am I like this? Or questioned whether you might be neurodivergent, you are not alone. You're not broken. With estimates suggesting that up to a quarter of the population may be autistic or have ADHD, it's time that we stop pathologizing difference and start understanding it. We're at a cultural tipping point. Awareness is growing, but stigma still lingers. This conversation invites clarity, compassion, and relief, and helps us all move toward a world where more of us can thrive by being who we really are. I am Linda Bucher, and honestly, I do have the very best job in the world because I get people unstuck. It's my superpower. I help high potential, multi-passionate humans, just like you, to find your superpowers to get to that next level and get the most out of life, because that is what you are here for. The way I do it is as a transformational speaker and as a master certified life coach. But before any of that happened, I was a chameleon living the first 45 years of my life trying to be what I thought the world needed me to be, while quietly feeling like a victim of circumstance. But everything changed when I stopped chasing someone else's version of who I should be or what success would look like. And I started showing up as who I really, truly am. And then I aligned my life with my truth, my values, and my gifts, and I've never looked back. So what was so cool about that journey was, personally, it transformed my life and it fueled my mission. And that is the best thing. So now it's my honor to help other people to break free. So I can help you break free from what's holding you back so you can step fully into who you are and unleash your brilliance into the world. And here's why. A, you have a rich, full life to lead. B, you have gifts that matter. And C, you have a difference to make in this world. So if you're finally ready to get unstuck and get to that next level and get the most out of your one big, beautiful, rich, full life, then I invite you to come say hello at lindabucher.com because there's just so much goodness waiting for you there. Okay, back to today's show. Too weird, too sensitive, too everything, or just right? Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Heather Cook of Autism Chrysalis, who's making big, beautiful ripples and a difference in this world in a very unique way. Heather works with people who have discovered in adulthood that they are autistic or have ADHD or both, and who are going through this transition period of finally understanding this and saying, okay, now what? So Heather helps them to readjust and realign their lives so that they can thrive. Heather, thank you so much for being with us today on Conversations Worth Your While.
I'm so happy to be here.
I'm excited for this conversation very much. It's going to be so enlightening and so helpful to people who are wondering if there's something wrong with them. So can you just, before we get into our conversation, can you tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do, how you're making these beautiful ripples in the world?
So I figured out when I was in my mid-30s that I am autistic. And later I figured out that I'm also ADHD. And it changed everything for me. I described it as my get out of jail free card so that I didn't have to try and fit into the mold that other people were trying to cram me into. And I could let myself off the hook for doing things a little differently, thinking a little differently, approaching things a little differently, saying things a little bit differently. And I undid years of shame and blame and guilt about that. And after I spent enough time working through my own issues and all that stuff, I reached a point where people started coming to me and saying, oh, can you talk to my friend who figured out that he's autistic, or my relative figured out that she's autistic, and can you work with them? And I started coaching about 6 years ago. And now I do that professionally. I'm a master certified coach, and and I help people who figured out, mostly as adults, or they might have been diagnosed as kids, but they're grappling with it in a new way now as adults, that they're autistic or ADHD, which is what we call it when you're autistic and ADHD, to break through that lifetime of neurotypical expectations,
Mm.
to figure out what's really you and what's this mask that you've built for yourself, to create sensory friendly strategies to deal with life and for it to feel better, just to get through day-to-day life, to communicate better with neurotypicals, but in ways that feel good to your autistic communication style,
Mm.
and to recover from autistic burnout. And honestly, just to create a life that you love living.
Mm. That's beautiful. That is such beautiful work. I'm so glad you're here. Okay, so let's start with, autism and ADHD are misunderstood, not just by people that, we can label as neurotypical, although I agree with you, there's really no such thing. I don't think any of us are typical of anything. But we don't have an understanding of people with autism and ADHD. But
Mhm.
people who don't have an understanding might not even recognize if this might be something, this might be the thing they've been struggling with that they didn't know. Like you said, you were in your mid 30s, right? So let's talk about
Yes.
that misunderstanding and the resulting, blame, shame, judgment, and all that anxiety and difficulties that happen because of that.
So a lot of times we go through life being called weird, different, but like not in a positive way, like as a blaming way. We're called lazy, we're called too sensitive, we're called not empathetic, we're called antisocial, we're called odd, we're called mavericks, we're called people who beat to the like they march to the beat of their own drum. Um, Anything from sort of neutral appellations to fairly negative, what's wrong with you, get your act together kind of labels. And we hear this so many times from so many people under so many different circumstances that we begin to believe that really it is us. Like we're the only one, and there's something fundamentally wrong with us. And we just need to get our act together. We need to try harder, even though you've been trying ridiculously hard, far more than anyone would ever expect anyone to actually try. You've been trying that hard, but you just need to try harder. And like it's not that. It's that you actually do think about things differently. Your nervous system does process the environment around you, your senses differently. Your natural communication style is different from what is thought to be typical in our society, from what the expectations are in our society. It's not bad, but it's just a little bit different. But when you go through life being told that you're the one who's doing it wrong, and you get that same message from so many people over so much time, it's really easy to believe it.
Mm.
But that message is basically coming from other people who don't understand either. And it's easier for them to blame you than to try to understand because they're also stressed out. They don't have like the energy to try and understand every single person, every single thing that's going on. Even when they want to, they may not have the information. They like a lot of parents are really mean well and they want to understand their kids, even their kids that are a little bit different, but they just don't have the information. So they make do. They try and figure things out the best they can, but
I can
they
speak
just
to
get
that.
frustrated.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So my son has ADHD, and I had it. I didn't really guess that until I recognized that I could tell him to do something, and he he would get lost and never do it. But I could tell his little brother and his little sister, like we're talking 2 and 4 years younger than him, I could tell the 3-year-old to go do that.
Mhm.
but the 7-year-old was unable to do it. So I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense because this kid is smart. Like I could tell his aptitude was pretty off the charts from the time he was 2 years old. Like he would impress me with some stuff. I'd be like, I can't believe a 2-year-old could do that. I can believe a 3-year-old could do that. Like off the charts, like of certain, I know there's like, I forgot, is it 7 types of intelligence from Harold Gardner? Excellent book. And so with certain types of intelligence, like off the charts. So I'm like, so how come you can't do something so simple as like go brush your teeth and get your shoes on? Like something simple, right? And
Right.
when I didn't know I didn't have an understanding of what was going on, then I could not have an understanding of how to communicate with my own
Right.
child in a positive way. And once I had this inkling. So once it was confirmed through a psychiatrist or psychologist, I guess it would have been, doing testing or whatever. Then, we were part of a really cool program in Buffalo. It's not here anymore. I think it's in Ohio now. But we had someone who was really like one of the foremost studiers of ADHD, and he had a big giant grant. And at the university here, they had a whole camp. They actually had developed some of the medications, etc. So they had this camp, and for you, if you wanted your kid to be able to go to this ADHD camp, summer camp, as a day camp, then as a parent, you had to go through these classes. You had to learn to like it's not the kid's fault. It's like asking a paraplegic to do cartwheels. It's not possible. I had to
Right.
shift my expectations, and when I did that, and learned how to communicate with him, not only was he feeling better instead of like, my mom doesn't like me and she likes my other siblings better. So not only did he feel better, but I felt less angry as a
Yeah.
parent. I felt so much more understanding. I did feel guilty because I had been yelling at him for a couple of years. But then, like,
Yeah.
what's wrong? Why can't you? Right.
So
So,
what was the trick that you learned of how to communicate with him in that situation?
okay. So I learned, first of all, I learned to get his full attention. So to put my hands on his shoulders and make eye contact and say, Josh, and have him like say to me, yes, mom. Right now I got his attention, right? And this
Okay.
was this was hilarious because we're standing by the back door when I was first trying this out. And I said, I need you to go brush your teeth next because we're going to go to school. So I need you to brush your teeth. Okay, mom, what are you going to do? I'm going to brush my teeth. So back and forth, I asked him again to tell me because they had trained me to say the first time you say something, their brain might register there's a noise somewhere in the room.
Mhm.
Right. The second time you say it, it's like Charlie Brown's mom, wah, 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 wah. Right. They didn't hear it. The third time you say it, now they're like, oh, she might be talking to me. So this is why the parents keep repeating. I said, why do I have to say it for the fifth time? Because he had ADHD, right? So when I learned, I don't have to say it 5 times. I just have to get his attention, which means I need to give him my attention. And then I get his attention. I tell him something. I ask him to repeat it back. As I'm doing this, a squirrel runs by. I swear to God, I know that's like an ADHD joke, squirrel, right? A squirrel runs by, he goes, oh, squirrel. And I'm like, oh, yeah, buddy, look at that, right? He's like 8 at
Uh-huh.
the time, right? And I'm like, what did I just ask you to do? And he was like, oh, his face, he was like, I don't know. Like he didn't know. And I said to
Right.
go brush your teeth. Oh, yeah, brush my teeth. Okay. So I learned to give him one command. I learned to get his attention and to give him my attention, to ask
Mhm.
him to ask it back. And then he could go do the thing. And then he felt successful. And I didn't feel frustrated.
And what you also did there is you, when he saw the squirrel, you didn't chide him for seeing the squirrel. You was like, oh yeah, look at the squirrel. That's interesting. And
Right.
then direct attention back to the thing. But then you were also giving him one task, not brush his teeth and
Uh,
go put on
oh,
his shoes.
yeah,
Too
that
much.
gets done. That would get done. One
Right. One
task.
task at a time.
Yep.
But as he grows and as he gets better at things, his executive function will develop. But this is how it develops so that he can do more. But an 8-year-old is not going to be able to do that. It takes longer to develop executive function.
Yeah.
But without the blame, you have a better relationship with him. He feels better about himself. Things actually get done, and no one's really upset.
Yes.
And even though that little conversation seems like it took longer, it actually takes less time than
Telling
telling
someone,
him going doing something else, finding him again, like going through that whole rigmarole. It takes way less time.
right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting when you understand other people, which is really what we want to help people to do during our conversation today. When you
Mm,
understand other people, you can shift your own expectations to
yeah.
meet reality instead of what's in your head of what should be, right?
Yes.
In meeting reality, like Byron Katie has this super great saying. I absolutely love this. When you argue with reality, you lose, but
Yep.
only 100% of the time. Right? Like I share that with every client. I share that a lot. So the reality is he couldn't do what his brother and sister could do with me communicating the same way I communicate to his brother and sister. The
Right.
reality was I needed to learn more about what was going on in his brain, and like the way, like my visual of his brain is in my brain, there's a difference. So when I think of how my brain works, I think of like, oh, it's like this big warehouse and there's all these shelves, and on the shelves there's all these filing cabinets and things are filed in there, and the old stuff's in the back of the warehouse and the new stuff's usually in the front. So I can get to the stuff in the back, but I might come to me in the middle of the night next week like, oh yeah, that was what that was. But it's there because my brain knows where it is. It's just got to go to the back of the warehouse. My son's warehouse looks like this. There's no shelves, there's no filing cabinets, but there's a lot of fans. Anything comes in, it all gets blown around. Like all these fans are blowing everything around. And some jingle that hasn't been on TV since he was 3 years old comes out of his mouth for no reason because that's the piece of paper that was at the front of the warehouse. And then he can, like, even to this day, he could walk in and put his car keys down in a place that is obvious, and in 5 seconds have no idea where his car keys are. So he's learned, like you said, executive function. Now he knows, Mom, my keys are here, but I'm saying it out loud, not just for you, but for me. Because I want to put, and at home, his keys are always in the same place 100% of the time, because he'll tear. Actually, I've seen him tear his hair, like being so frustrated to not know where something is that he just had, and feeling so, without even being reprimanded. I mean, feeling so um like there's something wrong with him. Like, why can't I remember it? And to when he, the more he learned about himself, the more accepting he could be. And I think that's a really good point for us to make today.
But that self-blame, that comes from hearing it from so many other people for so long. And I'm sure he got it from school. He got it from his coaches in sports. He got it from all sorts of other places. And honestly, sometimes at home. But like when you get it from so many other places, you take it on yourself.
Yeah.
And yes, there's a practical frustration sometimes if I can't find the thing. But that's a practical frustration. It's different from blaming myself for what is wrong with me. Why can't I fricking figure this thing out? Why can't I do anything right? There's a very big difference from between those two things.
Yeah. That reminds me of, I remember, like, I actually moved him out of our public middle school, because when you go to middle school, that's when you got to start going to all these different classes, and you've got your, they have like these agendas, right? You have to write everything down, right? And you're on your own to do it. No one's like saying, put all these pieces of paper in your folder and go give them to your mom, like they did in elementary school. And so he would come home and he would be so depressed. He would flop in his bed and he would cry because he felt so unsuccessful. So what's wrong with me? Why can't I? And I tried with the school. He had a 501, but he didn't have an IEP.
Okay.
And I think that was probably my fault, but I didn't want him to feel like he was being singled out and be different. So I just told the teachers small things. He doesn't need extra time for testing. He needs to not sit by a window, because the half hour will go and he won't have even put his name on the paper. Like, don't sit him by a window. Don't, sit him where he can't be distracted. Right. And just sign his agenda after class. So you see he wrote the homework down. He'll do it if he wrote it down. But when you said, here's the homework on the board, everybody, he could have been thinking about something else. So you got to be like, Josh, come see me, and let me see. Okay, you did write it down. Excellent job. And then I asked each teacher to sign the bottom. Some would, some wouldn't. And he was just feeling so unsuccessful and so bad about himself. What's wrong with me? Why can't I do what all these other kids can do? It was just really horrible for him. I moved him into a different school that was phenomenal, you know.
Good. I'm glad you found a good place for him.
Yeah.
And that tension between I know that I'm really smart, but I can't do these things that seem to be simple for other kids or other
Right.
adults. Doesn't It's not just for kids, but that tension between those is something that a lot of us who are neurodivergent grow up with because often we are very smart or at least of normal intelligence, but there's certain things that are supposedly simple that kids younger than us seem to pick up without any difficulties, but that we struggle with.
Right.
Sometimes, I mean, the big categories are executive function things and socialization things, especially if you're autistic. It's not that we can't do them, but we do them in a different way and we learn them in a different way. But the way that we learn them is very different than the way that they're generally taught. So we don't get taught them in a way that we can learn them.
Mm,
And so we end up feeling like we can't do this. I'm terrible at this. I'm never going to make it in life. I'm going to end up dying old and alone in a gutter and no one loves me. And it's very easy to catastrophize and go off in that direction.
uh,
But but this tension between I know I'm really smart and I also feel really stupid a lot of the time
mm,
builds up a lot of shame. And that's a lot of the things that I work with people on is undoing that,
right.
figuring out what is the truth, what is really going on here. And and when that frees up, it frees up so much internal space. It frees up so much. It's just like letting go of years and decades of built up shame and blame and guilt. And when you let go of that stress, by the way, executive function improves as a very handy side effect because executive function is, and also communication abilities like relationship skills are very heavily dependent on stress level.
Yes.
When you're stressed, you just don't deal with stuff as well. I mean, that's true for everyone. But when you don't have that intense amount of shame anymore, you can remember things better because there's space in the warehouse. All of a sudden, it clears out a whole section.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful. So let's talk about how being different is not bad. Like I could say like, oh well, you know, 80% of the population is under 6 feet, and the 20% that are over, there's something wrong with you, right? Not true. It's just different, right? So let's talk about how being different is not wrong or not bad, and specifically how autism and ADHD can be a gift instead of a curse.
The whole conversation around being different is basically predicated on the assumption that there is a right way to be and that you are deviating from that. Even if people don't like say that it's right, like even if on reflection they're not willing to say that, oh yes, of course there is a standard model human and everyone should be exactly like this. Even if they're not willing to go quite that far, I don't think most people would go quite that far, but there's still some sort of an assumption of you should be able to, and then
Mm,
there's a list. And if you can't do those things in the way that is expected and without me having to help you to do them, that there's something wrong and that it's your fault.
yeah.
But but this is basically setting up a fantasy version of reality that doesn't exist and then trying to compare what actually is to this fantasy reality and said because it doesn't match, it's wrong. But who lives like this? Who like there's no one who actually meets all of those criteria. Even when you do like fit into most of the categories, when you are white, male, straight, cis, and middle class at least, when you happen to fit into those categories, there's still something else.
Right.
There's proclivities, there's interests, there's the way that you talk about stuff, there's like Like, there's so many other things about people that are just different, and different is actually a good thing. Because if there weren't differences, if there weren't extreme differences, our society would not actually function. Because you need people who can do all of the different things and ideally like doing those different things.
Sure.
Like, we need people who are the artists. We need people who are the doctors. We need people who are the creatives. We need people who are the engineers. We need people who are the programmers. We need people who are the leaders. We need people who are just like cleaning and manual labor, like who see that as a sacred duty, who like we need the caretakers. We need all the different people, and we need people with a range of experiences and perspectives to fill us in on the gaps, because none of us can actually see from everyone else's point of view.
Right.
I mean, quite literally, we can never see from anyone else's point of view at some level. But we need people who have different body shapes and different types. We need people with different backgrounds from different cultures, who speak different languages, who have lived in different places, to give us new ideas and to say, oh, you know that thing that you've been struggling with? Here's an idea of how that might work differently based upon how I see it from this different perspective.
Yeah.
And those of us who are neurodivergent have a very different perspective, and we can offer that, and it's valuable.
Yes, it is. I know firsthand. My son thinks way outside the box.
Mhm,
When he was young, and I would be like, no, we can't do that because I'm an out loud thinker. He could
mhm.
think circles around my because and come up with a really good reason why we could do it. And I'd be like, oh, I should have just said no means no.
But that warehouse where all the fans are blowing, the advantage of that is that he's making connections between things that don't exist in your neatly ordered, straight lined warehouse.
Right.
Because in your warehouse, things need to make sense. They fit into their slot. There's a place for everything and everything in its place. And that's wonderful. We need people like that too. But we also need people who can make connections, because the things are all spinning around and it's like, oh, I would have never put that next to that. That's very interesting. I
Right.
wonder what that could do.
Yeah.
Maybe that would be like cool. Like, we need both kinds, and none of them are wrong.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's actually fascinating the different high levels of aptitude that can be found in that are found. Like I know someone else who's on the autistic spectrum, um, and I know a couple other people with ADHD for sure, and they're super, like they're doing big things in this world. They're doing important things in this world. They might struggle with some social aspects, when they're young. I've noticed that when they're younger, they
Mhm.
don't maybe take the social cues, or you know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? But
Uh-huh.
the aptitude, the things, that the capabilities are huge. I mean, they're just it's so impressive sometimes. This out of the box thinking, this level of creativity. Oh my God, it's so amazing. You are right. The world needs all of this, which means the world needs for us to understand each other so that we can work and live alongside each other, not just in harmony, but more synergistically.
Yes, absolutely. But you know those people that you just were thinking about that can do amazing things? What happens when they've been beaten down enough is that they can't do that.
Right.
They burn out, or they're depressed or too anxious, and they hide in their house and can't do anything. And and that's what I'm trying to help people with, is like getting out of that stuck place.
Right.
And people experience it to various levels. Some of my clients are in deep burnout, and some of them aren't working and whatnot, but they just feel out of place and they want to make their life better. Like, there's a whole range of it. But I don't think there's a single one of my clients who doesn't have a trauma history of some kind.
Sure. Absolutely.
Doesn't have,
Because
you
their
know,
parents and their peers and their schools like didn't
mhm.
understand, which is
Yep.
why this is such an important conversation that we're having today.
Yes.
So if we could, like, I think what we're kind of saying is we can't control what our history was, how we were treated, right? Whether we have ADHD or autism or don't, our histories are just that, they're history. As an adult, we get to make a choice if we want to stop believing the stories our child self believed. And if we want to be moving forward in being willing to have self acceptance and self love for that we're just perfect, just the way we are,
Yeah.
and that this is a gift, the way that we've been created. And one of the things like that we're bringing to light here, and I bring to light to my clients in a different way, is like I'll have them do these assessments that are out there, the cognitive assessment, maybe human design assessment, things like that. And the reason isn't just to understand more about yourself. Because yes, people could read more about ADHD and autism and understand it more. But the best thing that comes out of doing these self assessments is when you recognize who you are naturally and you're at like on a scale, right? There, it's like a continuum from here to here. Where am I? Like on any of these, the disc analysis, like I happen to be a 97 on the eye of the disc. That's influencer. Like that's way high, right? So there's no possible way I can be, a 2 and whatever a 2 influencer would do because I happen to be a 97 naturally. When you know where you are naturally, who you are naturally, and you recognize all the beauty in it and the cool things that are because of that, then you can also let go of who you're not. And
Yeah.
that is one of the beginning pathways to letting go of shame, is to recognize if I'm blue, I can't also be orange. Like it's not the same. I'm blue. Like, I'm blue. Here's what's so cool about blue. I don't have to think I'm supposed to be orange anymore now that I know I'm blue. Right. So that is the beauty. So I think what we're going to boil this down to at the end of this podcast today is like one thing we want to send people home with, to just, and I like to phrase it like, and I'm going to let you take a turn too. I like to phrase it, I'm willing to, because no one wants to jump all the way to like, oh, I have this new belief all of a sudden because I listened to this awesome podcast that Linda and Heather were talking about. It's more, I'm willing to. That's a really good way to start your new sentence, your new affirmation. I'm willing to accept that I have gifts in my ADHD or autism. I'm willing to accept and love who I am because I have big things to offer this world. I'm willing to let go of the stories that I've been believing that other people gave me or society gave me. I'm willing to ignore those instead focus on the truth that who I am is really cool.
If this is a new idea for some of your listeners, that might be a stretch.
Okay. All right.
Because we're talking about 30, 50, 60 years of built up messaging.
Okay.
I am willing to consider the idea that other people might have been wrong about me.
Oh, beautiful.
I'm willing to consider the possibility that I am okay the way I am.
Mm.
I'm willing to wonder if there's something else that might be more true than what I had been told.
Mm. Those are really beautiful prompts. Very beautiful. Thank you for sharing those with us. Heather, this has been a really cool conversation.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I know you have like a workshop on recovering from autistic burnout. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And then if a listener wants to, how they could take part in that or what they would need to do or how to contact you.
Sure. I have what I'm going to put in the links below is a recording of a workshop that I did that's totally free on recovering from autistic burnout. And it just outlines the 5 areas that I've identified as necessary to really make a full transformation, not just, oh, take some time off and get a babysitter and do a little self-care,
Yeah.
but like what it really takes to get out of the kind of autistic of the kind of burnout that comes from being autistic in a world that's not designed for us.
Mm.
And I also have a complete course on that if some people are interested after watching the sort of intro workshop. And it goes very, very deep into it. And that's available on my website, which is autismchrysalis.com. And you can find the burnout thing at autismchrysalis.com/burnout. That's the whole course. But there'll be a link to the free workshop, which is available on YouTube.
Awesome. Well, I'll be sure to make sure that makes the show notes.
Mhm.
So I just want to say thank you again for enlightening us. Even though I have experience personally with my own child, I have learned so much more from you today. And I think it's been very beautiful. So for any of our listeners that, I'm sure they're feeling some relief if they think it might, they might, have autism or have ADHD, or even if they might say, oh, that might be what my child, has, or my sister, or now that I noticed that, wow, that's very interesting. And to open eyes. And I think if that's the very least we've done today, we've done beautiful work in the world. So I just want to say thank you to you.
My pleasure.
Okay. All right, everyone. Well, that's our show. And once again, I'm Linda Bucher on a mission to inspire and impact millions of people to know their worth and to share their gifts, deliberately creating big, beautiful ripples in this world. And so if you're ready to finally get unstuck and get to that next level and get the most out of your life, head on over to Linda Bucher. It's a great first step. And if this episode has sparked something in you, please be sure to like it, to subscribe to this podcast, and to share it with someone that you care about. And come back next week for another honest, uplifting conversation to help you grow. So until next time, make sure you've made this conversation worth your while by fueling the spark that it ignited.